The alarm screamed through the cargo hold as the ship lurched violently to port. Lieutenant Derek Kane slammed against the bulkhead, his rifle clattering across the metal floor. Outside the reinforced windows, enemy plasma fire tore through the darkness of space, each impact shaking the transport like a toy in a child's fist. "We're breaking apart!" someone shouted from the cockpit. Derek didn't waste breath responding. He scrambled for his weapon as the emergency lights flickered red, casting everything in a hellish glow. The transport wasn't military grade. It was a contractor hauler barely armed, carrying relief supplies to the outer colonies. Easy prey for the Karvith raiders who'd been hunting human vessels for months. Another hit. The hull screamed. Derek's stomach dropped as artificial gravity failed for 3 seconds, then snapped back with brutal force. He hit the deck hard, tasting copper. Abandon ship. All hands, abandon ship. The order came too late. Through the viewport, Derek saw the escape pods already gone, glinting as they scattered into the black. He'd been in the cargo hold checking manifest logs when the attack started. Now he was alone in a dying ship with maybe 90 seconds before the reactor went critical. He sprinted toward the aft emergency pod, boots pounding against grated floor. 50 meters. 40. The corridor twisted from another impact, and he went down, sliding into a collapsed support beam. Pain lanced through his ribs. 30 meters. 20. The lights died completely. Derek activated his wrist light and kept moving, breath ragged in his throat. He could hear the reactor's whine building to a shriek, that distinctive pitch engineers called the death song. 10 meters. The pod bay door was sealed. Derek's fingers flew across the manual override panel, entering the emergency code. Nothing. He tried again. The display blinked red, mocking him. Come on, come on. 5 meters behind him, something moved in the darkness. Derek spun, light cutting through smoke and debris. His hand went to his sidearm before his brain processed what he was seeing. A figure slumped against the wall. Small, humanoid, wearing what looked like formal clothing, torn and burned. Long dark hair covered most of her face, but he caught a glimpse of pale skin, too pale, and eyes that reflected his light like a cat's. Not human. The reactor's whine hit fever pitch. 20 seconds, maybe less. Derek had a choice. Try the pod door again or check if this thing was alive. He chose wrong. He always chose wrong. Derek crossed the distance in 4 strides and dropped beside her. Her skin was ice cold. Her chest wasn't moving. But those eyes tracked him, conscious and aware, even as her lips barely parted. "Human," she whispered, and her voice carried an accent he'd never heard before. "How unfortunate for you." Then the ship exploded. Derek woke to silence and cold. Not the cold of space, but something else. Something that lived in his bones and whispered that he should already be dead. His eyes opened to darkness, broken only by emergency strips along what remained of the corridor. The ship hadn't exploded. Not completely. The reactor must have failed instead of detonating, leaving them adrift in a crippled hulk that was bleeding heat into the void. He tried to move and couldn't. Something held him pinned against the wall, something stronger than hydraulics and twice as unforgiving. Derek's wrist light was gone, but in the dim glow he saw her. The woman from before, except she wasn't slumped anymore. She was standing, one hand pressed flat against his chest, holding him in place like he weighed nothing at all. "Don't struggle," she said. Her voice was clearer now, refined, carrying the kind of authority that came from centuries of giving orders. "You'll only make this harder." "Make what harder?" Derek managed. His ribs screamed where he'd hit the beam earlier. Probably cracked. "Let me go." "No." She leaned closer, and he saw her face clearly for the first time. Beautiful in a way that seemed wrong, like something carved from marble and given just enough warmth to mock the living. Her eyes were deep red, the color of arterial blood. "You chose to help me. Now you'll finish what you started." "I didn't start anything. The ship blew and we survived. That's it." She smiled, and Derek's heart tried to climb out through his throat. Her canines were too long, too sharp, designed for one specific purpose that every human instinct in his body recognized as mortal danger. "The ship didn't blow," she said. "I stopped it. Burned the last of my strength holding the reactor together long enough for emergency containment to engage. I saved your life, human. You should be grateful. Then we're even. Let me go." "We're not even her." Free hand came up, fingers trailing along his jaw with a touch like frozen silk. I'm dying, have been for 3 days since my ship was destroyed and my court scattered. I need blood to survive, and you're the only warm body in 100,000 kilometers. Derek's hand dropped to his sidearm. Gone. Must have lost it in the blast. He had a knife in his boot, but he couldn't reach it with her holding him like this. I'm not a volunteer blood bank, he said. You became one the moment you checked on me instead of saving yourself. Compassion is a weakness, Lieutenant. Remember that in your next life. She moved faster than his eyes could track, and then her mouth was on his throat, teeth breaking skin with surgical precision. Derek shouted and tried to throw her off, but it was like fighting a titanium statue. She didn't move, didn't budge, just held him there and drank while his vision started to blur at the edges. Pain came first, sharp and immediate, then something else, a pulling sensation, like his life was draining through a hole he couldn't see or stop. His legs went weak. The emergency lights dimmed, or maybe that was his consciousness failing. Just when Derek thought he'd black out, she stopped. She pulled back, and he saw his blood on her lips, vivid red against that impossible pale skin. But something had changed. Her eyes were brighter now. Her face had color, faint but present. She looked alive in a way she hadn't before. Better, she said, almost to herself. Much better. Derek sagged against the wall, hand pressed to his neck. The wounds were small, clean, already clotting. She'd been precise, professional, taken exactly what she needed, and stopped before it killed him. Who are you? He asked, because his brain was still trying to catch up with what had just happened. Princess Lyanna Valeran, third daughter of the Eternal Court of Nightborn, heir to the Crimson Throne and keeper of the old ways. She said it without pride, just fact. And you are my prisoner until I decide otherwise. The hell I am. The hell you are, she agreed. Because the ship is dead, our comms are gone, and the nearest functional beacon is 2 days away through vacuum. You need me to survive just as much as I need you. Derek wanted to argue, but she was right. The transport was a tomb. No power except emergency reserves. No engines. No way to call for help. He was trapped in a metal coffin with a vampire princess who'd just made him into her personal feeding supply. How often? He asked. How often what? How often do you need to feed? Lyanna considered him with those red eyes, calculating. Every 12 hours to maintain strength. Every 6 if I need to use my abilities. Every 3 if we encounter trouble. That'll kill me. Not if you're smart about it. Hydrate. Rest. Let your body regenerate what I take. She stepped back, finally releasing him. I don't want you dead, Lieutenant. Dead blood is useless to me. Derek pushed off the wall, testing his balance. Dizzy but functional. He'd lost maybe a pint, not enough to cripple him, but enough to know this wasn't sustainable long term. There has to be another way, he said. There isn't. Lyanna turned away, moving toward the cockpit with inhuman grace. I've already searched this wreck while you were unconscious. No medical supplies, no stored blood, no alternative. Just you and me and whatever time we have before life support fails completely. How long? 4 days. Maybe 5 if we're lucky. Derek followed her through the twisted corridor, stepping over debris and broken equipment. The cockpit was worse than he'd imagined. Consoles smashed, viewports cracked, the pilot's seat empty and stained with something he didn't want to identify. Where's the crew? He asked. Escape pods launched before the attack ended. They're gone. They left me. They left both of us. Lyanna settled into the navigator's chair, looking almost relaxed despite the carnage around them. The question now is whether we die here together or find a way to survive until rescue arrives. Derek wanted to hate her. Should have hated her. She'd fed on him without permission, claimed ownership of his blood like it was her right. But she'd also saved his life when the reactor failed, and her logic was sound even if it made his skin crawl. Fine, he said. We work together, but when we get rescued, you let me go. No strings, no claims. We part ways and forget this ever happened. Lyanna smiled again, and this time it carried something darker, something that promised she had no intention of keeping that bargain. Of course, Lieutenant, she said. Whatever you say. The emergency rations lasted 18 hours before Derek realized they'd been compromised in the attack. Half the packets were torn, contents frozen solid from brief vacuum exposure. What remained wouldn't keep him functional if Liana kept feeding every 12 hours like she'd promised. "We have a problem," he said, holding up a ration bar that crumbled into ice crystals when he squeezed it. Liana glanced over from where she'd been examining the communications array, her fingers moving across dead controls with the ease of someone who'd done this before. "You need more food." "I need any food." "Real food. Protein. Iron. Things that help me make more blood." Derek tossed the ruin bar aside. "What I have here buys me maybe 2 days at quarter rations. Then we conserve." She didn't look concerned. "I'll feed less frequently." "That makes you weaker." "It keeps you alive longer. Simple mathematics." Derek studied her in the red emergency lighting. She looked healthier than when he'd found her, color in her cheeks, strength in her movements. But there was still something fragile underneath, like glass that had been cracked and poorly mended. "How long were you without blood?" he asked. "Before you found me." 3 days. Liana's hand stilled on the console. "My ship was ambushed by the same raiders who hit this transport. They knew what I was. Brought weapons designed to kill Nightborn. Silver core rounds, UV grenades, the works. Your crew? Dead. All of them. I managed to reach an escape pod, but I was already wounded. Already fading." Her voice stayed level, but Derek heard the edge underneath. "By the time I boarded this ship, had perhaps 6 hours left before I fell into the long sleep." "What's that?" "Death for your kind. For mine, it's closer to stasis. The body shuts down to preserve whatever life remains. You can survive it, but waking requires massive amounts of blood, more than one human can safely provide. Derek absorbed that, so I saved your life, and now I'm saving yours by keeping this wreck from tearing apart completely. The structural integrity fields are failing. Without me reinforcing them every few hours, we'd already be breathing vacuum." She had a point. Derek had noticed the hull groaning less when she was nearby, the way breach warnings seemed to quiet when she placed her hands on certain bulkheads. Whatever abilities the Nightborn possessed went beyond just strength and speed. "Tell me about the raiders," he said, changing tack. "Why hit civilian transports? They're not after cargo. They're hunting." Liana turned to face him fully. "The Karvith Collective wants humanity removed from this sector. They see your expansion as a threat, your colonies as invasions. So they strike soft targets, kill civilians, create fear. That's terrorism. That's war. Your people just haven't admitted it yet." She moved closer, and Derek fought the urge to back away. The Collective has been planning this for years. They've hit 17 human ships in the last month alone. Killed thousands. And your military still treats it as isolated piracy. How do you know all this? Because the Nightborn have been watching. We have interests in this sector too, Lieutenant. Trade agreements, territorial claims, allies we'd prefer not to see slaughtered. Liana stopped just outside his personal space. "I was traveling to a diplomatic summit when my ship was destroyed, carrying intelligence that could have prevented this." Derek felt something cold settle in his gut. What kind of intelligence? Attack vectors, fleet positions, targets for the next wave of raids. Her red eyes held his. "Information that's now lost because I'm trapped in this wreck with you instead of delivering it to people who could use it. Then we need to get that information out." "With what?" "The comms are slagged. The emergency beacon is damaged. We're dark and silent until someone stumbles across us or we drift close enough to a patrol route for sensors to pick us up." Derek moved to the communications station, ignoring Liana's skepticism. He'd trained as a field engineer before transferring to security. If the main systems were dead, maybe he could jury-rig something from the backup arrays. He worked for 3 hours, stripping components from other systems, rerouting power from non-essential functions. His hands shook from blood loss and lack of food, but he kept going, driven by the knowledge that people were dying while they floated helpless. Liana watched in silence, occasionally steadying him when dizziness made him sway. She didn't offer to help. Didn't interfere, just observed with the patience of something that had lived long enough to know when to wait. Finally, Derek managed to coax a weak signal from the backup transmitter. Not enough for two-way communication, but enough to broadcast a distress pulse on military frequencies. "There," he said, sagging against the console. "It's active." "Low power, but someone might hear it." "Might," Liana echoed. "That's the best word you could choose. It's better than nothing." Is it, now the Karveth will know we survived if they're monitoring this area? They'll come to finish what they started. Derek hadn't considered that. His exhaustion made thinking difficult, made everything feel like wading through mud. He needed rest, food, time to recover from what she'd taken. You need to feed again, Liana said, reading his condition. And I need to feed from you. We're both running on fumes, I can't. Not yet. Give me a few more hours. You don't have a few more hours. Look at yourself. Derek caught his reflection in a dark monitor, pale, sweating despite the cold, trembling. She was right. He was crashing hard. Fine, he said, but smaller this time. I can't keep giving you full feeds. Liana nodded. Agreed. Come here. She guided him to the navigator's chair, surprisingly gentle for something that could snap his spine without effort. Derek sat, tilting his head to expose his neck, hating how familiar this was starting to feel. Wait, Liana said. She disappeared into the cargo hold and returned with a salvaged medical kit, pulling out antiseptic and gauze. If we're doing this regularly, we do it properly. No infections, no complications. She cleaned his throat where she'd bitten before, her touch clinical now rather than predatory. Then she leaned in, and Derek closed his eyes as her teeth found the same wounds, reopening them with precision that barely hurt. The pulling sensation came again, that strange intimacy of feeling your life drain into someone else. But this time Liana stopped sooner, pulling back after maybe 30 seconds. Half feed, she said, applying pressure to stop the bleeding. It'll keep me functional for 8 hours. We'll reassess then. Derek felt lightheaded but not critical. She'd kept her word, taken only what she needed, nothing more. Why are you being careful with me? He asked. You could just drain me dry and wait for rescue on your own. Liana met his eyes while bandaging his neck. Because you're not just food, Lieutenant. You're a person who chose compassion over survival when you could have left me to die. That means something to my kind. What does it mean that I owe you a blood debt, and Nightborn always pay their debts? She finished with the bandage and stepped back. You saved my life. Now I'm bound to preserve yours. Not because I need you, because honor demands it. Before Derek could respond, the ship lurched violently. Alarms screamed back to life as something impacted the hull. Not debris, but weapons fire, precise and deliberate. Liana's head snapped toward the viewports. They found us. Through the cracked glass, Derek saw lights moving in the darkness. Ships. 3 of them. Karveth raiders, closing fast with weapons charging. The beacon, he said. They tracked the beacon. Get to the cargo hold. There might be weapons there. What are you going to do? Liana smiled, and for the first time Derek saw what she really was beneath the diplomatic veneer. Something ancient and predatory and utterly without mercy. What I was made to do, Lieutenant. I'm going to remind the Karveth why they used to fear the dark. Derek found 2 pulse rifles in the cargo hold, both damaged but functional. He grabbed the one with a fuller charge pack and sprinted back to the cockpit as the Karveth raiders opened fire. The transport shuddered under the barrage, hull plating screaming as plasma bolts carved through weakened sections. Liana stood at the primary viewport, hands pressed against the reinforced glass, eyes closed in concentration. Derek felt it before he saw it, a shift in pressure that made his ears pop. The structural fields around the ship intensified, glowing faintly blue as she poured power into them. How long can you hold them? He shouted over the alarms. Not long enough. Her voice was strained. They're using heavy cannons. I can deflect glancing hits, but a direct strike will punch through. Derek moved to the weapons station, praying something still worked. The targeting systems were dead, but manual controls showed green. He'd have to eyeball it, track targets without computer assistance, fire manually like some ancient gunner from Earth's naval days. I'm going to return fire, he said. When I do, they'll focus on the gun ports. Be ready. Do it. Derek activated the dorsal turret, feeling it grind to life beneath his fingers. The transport only had 2 defensive guns, light caliber, meant to discourage pirates, not fight off military raiders, but surprise was worth something. He acquired the closest Karveth ship through the manual sight and fired. The pulse cannon spat energy, tracers cutting through vacuum to slam into the raider's flank. Shields flared and held, but the ship broke formation, clearly not expecting return fire from a crippled transport. Again, Liana said, keep them scattered. Derek fired repeatedly, walking shots across all three raiders, forcing them to maneuver instead of concentrating their fire. It bought them maybe 20 seconds before the Carveth adapted, splitting their formation to attack from multiple vectors simultaneously. A plasma bolt hit the portside dead center. Liana screamed, a sound Derek felt in his bones as the impact overwhelmed her reinforcement and tore through into the cargo hold. Atmosphere vented an explosive rush before emergency bulkheads slammed shut, sealing the breach. "I can't hold them," she gasped, blood trickling from her nose. "They're too strong." Derek's mind raced. 3 raiders against a dying transport, and 2 people, one of whom was low on blood and the other half dead from giving it. No reinforcements coming. No escape pods left. No options except surrender or die fighting. He chose option 3. "Can you move fast in vacuum?" he asked. Liana looked at him like he'd gone insane. "What? Can you survive outside the ship? Move between vessels?" "Yes, but what does that matter?" Derek pulled up the emergency systems, finding the control he needed. The manual airlock override, designed for catastrophic hull failure. It would vent the entire cockpit section into space in 3 seconds flat, because they expect us to defend, not attack. He grabbed an emergency vac suit from the locker, the kind rated for maybe 10 minutes of exposure. "I'm going to depressurize the cockpit. You're going to board one of those raiders and disable it from inside. That's suicide. For me, maybe. Not for you." Derek sealed the helmet, checking the suit's integrity. "Marginal, but functional. You said Nightborn can survive vacuum. Prove it." Liana stared at him for 3 heartbeats, then smiled. Not her diplomatic smile or her predatory one. This was something new. Respect, maybe. Or recognition of madness that matched her own. "You're insane," she said. "I'm human. We specialize in bad ideas." Derek moved to the airlock controls. "On my mark, I blow the cockpit. You go straight for the lead raider. I'll provide covering fire and try to keep the other 2 busy. This won't work. It will if we commit." He met her eyes through the helmet. "Trust me like I trusted you." The structural fields were failing completely now, collapse imminent. And now it raked. They had maybe 2 minutes before the transport broke apart regardless of what they did. Liana pulled off her coat, standing in just torn formal wear that wouldn't survive vacuum but didn't need to. Her body would adapt, would endure where human flesh would freeze and rupture. She moved to the viewport, calculating angles and distances. "When this is over," she said quietly, "we're going to discuss your definition of reasonable plans. Deal? Ready? No. Do it anyway." Derek slammed the override. The cockpit exploded outward, atmosphere venting in a hurricane roar that would have torn Derek apart if not for the suit's mag boots locking him to the deck. Liana shot through the breach like a missile, crossing the distance to the lead raider in seconds, her body nothing but a dark blur against stars. The Carveth never saw her coming. She hit their hull and punched through, literally tearing an access panel free and climbing inside. Derek watched through the manual scope as the raiders' formation broke, the ship spinning wildly as internal systems failed. The other 2 raiders turned their guns on him. Derek fired everything the transport had, both turrets and the ventral cannon he'd forgotten existed, throwing up a wall of energy that forced the Carveth to evade. He wasn't trying to hit them anymore. Just survived long enough for Liana to work. The lead raider's engines died. Then its weapons. Then it started venting atmosphere from a dozen new holes that appeared along its spine, punched from inside by something impossibly strong. 30 seconds later, Liana emerged from the wreckage carrying a Carveth warrior in each hand. She hurled them into space like discarded toys and kicked off toward the second raider. This time the Carveth were ready. They opened fire on her, plasma and kinetic rounds filling vacuum with lethal energy. Liana twisted midair, dodging some shots, taking others that burned through her clothing and scored her skin. But she didn't stop. Didn't slow, just kept coming with inhuman determination. She hit the second raider hard enough to dent its armor, then tore through its point defense turrets like they were made of paper. Derek lost sight of her as she disappeared into the ship's infrastructure. The third raider broke off, clearly deciding this wasn't worth the fight. It fired one last salvo at the transport, more out of spite than strategy, then burned hard for open space. Derek let it go. He couldn't stop it anyway, and he had bigger problems. The transport was coming apart, structural integrity at critical failure. He had maybe 60 seconds before total collapse. The second raider went dark, systems failing as Liana finished whatever she was doing inside. Then she appeared again, launching from its hull directly toward Derek. She crossed the void in heartbeats and slammed into the transport's hull beside the blown cockpit. Her hands found purchase on twisted metal, and she climbed inside, moving like gravity meant nothing. "We need to leave," she said, breath frosting in the freezing air. "Now. The raiders, disabled, won't be bothering anyone." She grabbed Derek and pulled him toward the airlock leading to the cargo bay. "But this ship has minutes left. We're evacuating to the raider I just cleared." They ran through corridors that groaned and buckled, atmosphere leaking from 100 new breaches. Derek's suit alarms screamed about pressure loss and temperature drop, but he kept moving, trusting Liana to navigate. She brought them to the hull breach she'd made earlier, the one that had vented the cargo hold. Beyond it, maybe 20 meters away, the Carveth raider drifted dark and silent. "Jump," Liana said. "I can't make that. You don't have to." She grabbed him around the waist. "I'll carry you." Before Derek could argue, she leaped. They crossed vacuum in terrifying silence, Derek's stomach lurching as his inner ears screamed about the wrongness of freefall. Then they hit the raider's hull, Liana absorbing the impact and pulling them through the breach she'd made. Inside, the ship was a slaughterhouse. Derek tried not to look at what she'd done to the crew, the efficiency with which she'd torn through trained warriors. This was what the Nightborn had been before diplomacy, before treaties and summits, pure apex predators who ruled the dark between stars. Liana sealed the breach behind them with emergency patches and restored atmosphere. Derek pulled off his helmet, gasping in air that tasted like copper and fear. "The ship's functional," Liana said, moving to the bridge. "Navigation, weapons, engines, everything we need. You killed them all. I gave them the same chance they gave my crew. None." She didn't sound remorseful. "Come, we have work to do." Derek followed on numb legs, watching as she brought the raider's systems online. Outside the viewport, the transport finally broke apart, scattering debris across several kilometers. "That was our ride home," he said. "This is our ride home now." Liana plotted a course, her fingers dancing across alien controls like she'd used them before. "And our weapon." The Carveth were stupid enough to leave their intelligence database intact. Ship movements, attack plans, everything. Derek saw it then, the entire picture. "You planned this." "No. I improvised." She looked at him with those red eyes. "Just like you taught me." The engines fired, pushing them away from the debris field toward the nearest human outpost. But Derek knew something had changed between them. The dynamic had shifted. She wasn't just his prisoner anymore, and he wasn't just her food source. They were something else now, something dangerous. The Carveth raider handled like a brick with engines, but Liana flew it with practiced ease. Derek watched her navigate through debris fields and sensor shadows, avoiding detection like she'd spent years running blockades instead of attending diplomatic functions. "Where did you learn to fly like this?" he asked. "I'm 347 years old, Lieutenant. I've had time to pick up skills." She adjusted their course, dropping below the ecliptic plane to avoid a patrol route. "Flying was necessary when you're hunted as often as royalty tends to be." Derek was examining the Carveth database, translating what he could through the ship's limited human-compatible interface. What he found made his blood run cold. "They've got targets listed here for the next 6 months. Stations, colony worlds, supply convoys." He scrolled through tactical data that should have been classified. "How did they get this information?" "Someone's feeding it to them, someone human." "That's impossible, is it?" Liana glanced at him. "Your species has the same capacity for betrayal as any other. Money, power, ideology, take your pick. Someone wants this war to happen." Derek didn't want to believe it, but the data was too accurate to be anything else. Fleet movements predicted down to the hour. Security rotations, weak points in defensive grids. This wasn't guesswork or espionage. This was insider knowledge. "We need to get this to command," he said. "We will. But first we need to survive long enough to reach friendly territory." Liana brought up the navigation display. "The nearest human outpost is Garrison 7, 4 days away at current speed. But there's a problem." "What problem?" I need to feed in 3 hours. You need medical attention and real food in less than 2. This ship has neither. Derek checked the Carveth supply stores. Ration packs designed for their biology, which meant poison for humans. Medical supplies incompatible with his physiology. Nothing he could use. There's a way station marked here, he said, pointing to a neutral trading post on the route. Freeport Nexus. It's operated by the Merchants Guild. No military affiliation. Too risky. The Carveth will be watching all public stations. Then we don't have a choice. I can't make it to Garrison 7 without food, and you can't keep feeding on me without proper supplements. Derek pulled up the station's specifications. We go in quiet, resupply fast, leave before anyone notices. Liana considered it, clearly calculating odds Derek couldn't see. Finally, she nodded. 2 hours maximum. We dock, you get what you need, we leave. No complications. Agreed. They made the approach 3 hours later, Derek's hands shaking from low blood sugar and exhaustion. Liana had fed again before they arrived, taking barely enough to sustain herself, but it left Derek barely functional. Freeport Nexus was a spinning wheel of metal and commerce. Hundreds of ships docked along its outer ring. Merchants from a dozen species traded goods in the gray areas where law became suggestion. Perfect for anonymity. Perfect for ambush. Liana brought them into a commercial berth, using forged credentials pulled from the Carveth database. No alarms, no challenges. Just another anonymous trader stopping for supplies. Stay close to me, she said, as they entered the station proper. If something goes wrong, I need to be able to reach you quickly. Derek nodded, too tired to argue. The station's main concourse was a chaos of species and languages, trade happening in corners and alcoves, while security drones drifted overhead maintaining minimal order. He found a supply depot that accepted credit chits and bought everything he needed. High-protein rations, vitamin supplements, iron pills, medical supplies designed for humans. The merchant didn't ask questions, just processed the transaction and handed over sealed packages. Done, Derek said, rejoining Liana near the docking ring. We can leave. Not yet. She was staring at something across the concourse. We have a problem. Derek followed her gaze and saw them. Carveth warriors, 4 of them, moving through the crowd with purpose. They weren't browsing. They were hunting. They're looking for their missing raider, Liana said quietly. Someone must have reported it overdue. Can they track us? Not specifically, but they'll check every ship that arrived in the last 6 hours. We're on that list. Derek's exhausted brain tried to formulate plans and came up empty. They couldn't fight 4 Carveth warriors at a crowded station without causing a massacre. Couldn't run without drawing attention. Couldn't hide because the ship was already flagged for inspection. I have an idea, Liana said. You won't like it. Tell me anyway. We don't run. We walk right past them. She pulled Derek close, arranging them like a couple browsing together. The Carveth are looking for survivors from their raider. They're not looking for a night-born princess and her human companion on a casual supply run. That's insane. You keep using that word. I'm starting to think it's your species motto. She adjusted her appearance, somehow making her formal wear look less destroyed and more fashionable. Act natural. Look bored. Trust me. They walked directly toward the Carveth patrol, Liana chatting quietly about fictional cargo deals, while Derek tried not to look like someone who'd killed half the warrior's crew. The Carveth passed within meters, their compound eyes scanning faces, their translator implants picking up fragments of conversation. One of them looked directly at Derek. Paused. Started to reach for something. Liana laughed at that exact moment, a bright sound that carried across the concourse, and touched Derek's arm in a gesture so natural it looked rehearsed. The Carveth warrior's attention shifted to her, scanning her face, finding nothing that matched whatever parameters they were using. They moved on. Derek didn't breathe until they were back at the docking berth, sealing themselves inside the raider. His hands were shaking worse than before, adrenaline crash-compounding blood loss. That was too close, he said. That was perfect. Liana initiated departure protocols, requesting clearance from station control. They're still looking for threats. We showed them a couple. The station granted clearance without issue. They undocked and burned for open space, putting distance between themselves and potential discovery. Derek collapsed into the navigator's seat, exhaustion finally winning. He managed to swallow some supplements and force down a ration bar before his body simply quit. "Sleep," Liana said, adjusting their course for Garrison 7. "I'll wake you when we're closer. You need to feed again. I can wait." "You can't raise." Her voice was gentler than he expected. "Sleep, Derek. I'll keep watch." He wanted to argue but couldn't find the energy. His eyes closed despite his best efforts, and consciousness slipped away like water through fingers. Derek woke to alarms and violent maneuvering. The ship was spinning, taking evasive action, weapons fire lighting up the viewports. "What's happening?" he shouted, strapping into the seat. "Company," Liana said through gritted teeth. She was flying one-handed, the other pressed against her side where blood seeped through her clothing. "3 Carveth interceptors, they found us. How? Does it matter? They're here." She threw the raider into a tight spiral, avoiding a missile that detonated close enough to ravel their teeth. And they brought friends. Derek pulled up the tactical display. 3 ships, military grade, faster and better armed than their stolen raider. They were boxed in, unable to jump to faster-than-light travel without being torn apart during the vulnerable transition. "We can't fight them," he said. "I know, and we can't outrun them." "I know that, too." Liana's eyes were bright red now, stress and blood loss pushing her towards something primal, which leaves one option. She cut the engines completely, letting momentum carry them while she diverted all power to shields and weapons. "What are you doing?" "Making them think we're crippled, bait." She activated the distress beacon, broadcasting false surrender protocols. "When they close to board, we hit them with everything we have. Point-blank range. Maximum damage. That's suicide if it doesn't work. Then we better make it work." The Carveth took the bait, closing formation to surround them. Derek could see warriors moving behind viewports, preparing boarding equipment. Liana waited until they were within 50 meters. Then she fired everything. The raiders' weapons were designed for ship-to-ship combat at range, not point-blank execution. The energy release was catastrophic, overloading shields and punching through armor like it wasn't there. 2 interceptors died instantly, reactors breaching in twin fireballs. The third survived long enough to return fire, raking their raider from bow to stern. Hull plating vaporized, systems failed, and something critical broke loose in engineering with a shriek of tortured metal. Liana killed it with the last functioning weapon, a sustained beam that carved through the interceptor's bridge. Then their raider started dying. "Engineering is gone," Derek said, reading damage reports that made no sense. "Life support failing. Hull integrity at 12%. "Can we jump?" "Not without engines." Liana slumped in the pilot's seat, that wound in her side still bleeding. She looked exhausted in a way Derek had never seen, like someone who'd burned their last reserves and found nothing left. "Then we drift," she said quietly, "and hope someone finds us before we freeze." Derek checked their position. They were close to the shipping lanes, close enough that a patrol might detect them. But close wasn't guaranteed. Close was just another way to die slowly instead of fast. He looked at Liana, at the blood she was losing, and made a decision. "Take what you need," he said, moving to her side. "What? My blood? Take it. You're dying and I need you functional if we're going to survive." He tilted his head, exposing his neck. "So feed. Get strong, fix what you can fix." Liana stared at him. "That will kill you. Maybe, or maybe it saves us both." Derek met her eyes. "Your choice, princess. But make it fast. We're running out of time." Liana didn't hesitate. She pulled Derek close and bit down hard, driven by necessity rather than precision. The pain was sharper this time, desperate, and Derek felt the pull immediately. Not the controlled feeding from before, but something rawer, more primal. His vision grayed at the edges. His legs went weak. He sagged against her, and she held him upright while drinking deep, taking what she needed to survive. When she finally stopped, Derek couldn't stand. She lowered him carefully to the deck, his blood vivid on her lips, and for a moment he thought he'd miscalculated. Given too much, killed himself trying to save them both. Then Liana moved. She crossed to the engineering section faster than his eyes could track, her wound already closing, strength flooding back into her frame. Derek heard metal tearing, components being ripped free and repositioned, She was rebuilding systems by hand, using Nightborn's strength to accomplish what would take human engineers hours with proper tools. The life support stabilized first. Warmth flooded back into the cabin as environmental controls came online. Then partial power to the engines, enough for maneuvering. Then structural reinforcement. Liana literally welding breaches shut with superheated metal she shaped with her bare hands. Derek watched through fading consciousness, marveling at what she could do when fully fed. This wasn't just enhanced strength or speed. This was something beyond human comprehension, abilities that made her closer to a force of nature than a person. She returned to him after 20 minutes, the ship functional enough to limp toward help. Her clothing was destroyed, burned away by the heat of her work, but she didn't seem to notice or care. "You're dying," she said, checking his pulse. "Too slow. Too weak. I took too much." "Had to," Derek managed. His voice sounded distant even to himself. "Did it work? The ship will hold, but you won't." She gathered him up, carrying him to what passed for medical bay on the Carveth Raider. "I need to stabilize you, but their equipment isn't compatible with human physiology." "Then improvise." He tried to smile. "You're good at that." Liana laid him on the medical table and started working, using what she knew of human biology and what the Carveth equipment could be adapted to provide. IV fluids that were close enough to saline, stimulants that might keep his heart beating, temperature regulation to prevent shock. But Derek could feel himself slipping. The blood loss was too severe. His body couldn't compensate, couldn't regenerate fast enough. He was going into cascade failure, organs shutting down one by one. "There's one more option," Liana said quietly. She was holding his hand, and her skin was warm now from his blood flowing through her veins. "But you have to agree to it. What option?" "I can give you my blood, not to drink, through direct transfusion." She pulled up a screen showing complex medical data. Nightborn blood carries regenerative properties. "It won't make you one of us, but it will keep you alive long enough for proper treatment." Derek's fuzzy brain tried to process that. Side effects unknown. This has never been done before. You might heal perfectly. You might develop complications. You might reject it completely and die anyway. Her red eyes held his. "But it's the only chance you have." He should have been afraid. Should have questioned what mixing human and Nightborn biology might do to him. But fear required energy he didn't have, and questions required time he'd run out of. "Do it," he said. Liana worked fast, adapting Carveth medical equipment to create a direct blood transfer system. She cut her wrist with surgical precision and connected it to Derek's IV line, her blood flowing dark and viscous into his dying body. The effect was immediate and agonizing. Derek screamed as his veins caught fire, every nerve ending lighting up like he'd been electrocuted. His back arched off the table, muscles spasming violently. Liana held him down within human strength while her blood rewrote his biology at the cellular level. His heart, which had been failing, suddenly hammered at twice its normal rate. His lungs, which had been collapsing, inflated and began pulling oxygen with desperate efficiency. His wounds, which had been bleeding out, started closing with visible speed. But the pain didn't stop. It built and built until Derek's consciousness fractured under the weight of it. He woke 3 hours later to silence and stillness. His body felt wrong, like it belonged to someone else. Too strong, too aware. Every sensation amplified beyond normal human range. Liana sat beside the medical table, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. "How do you feel?" she asked. Derek took inventory. No pain, no weakness. His heart beat steady and strong. His breathing was easy. He felt better than he had in days, better than he should have felt after nearly dying. "Different," he said. "What did you do to me? I saved your life. The rest is still unknown." She helped him sit up. "Your vital signs are stable but elevated. Strength increased by approximately 40%. Reflexes faster. Healing accelerated. All temporary, I think. The effects should fade as my blood is processed out of your system." "Should?" "This is unprecedented territory, Derek. I don't have answers." She moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars. "What I do know is that we're bonded now in a way that goes beyond necessity. My blood in your veins creates a connection. I can feel your heartbeat even from here. Sense your emotional state, and you'll feel the same with me." Derek tested it, reaching for that connection, and felt her there, a presence at the edge of his awareness, foreign but not hostile. He could sense her concern, her uncertainty, her guilt over what she'd been forced to do. "This is permanent?" he asked. "I don't know. Maybe. Probably." Liana turned to face him. "I'm sorry. You didn't consent to this bond. But it was this or watch you die." Derek stood, testing his new strength. He felt like he could tear steel, run for miles, fight for hours without tiring. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. "We need to reach Garrison 7, he said, pushing aside questions that had no answers. "How long until we arrive?" 18 hours at our current speed. But there's another problem. The Carveth weren't alone. I'm detecting a larger force moving through this sector. A battle group, maybe 20 ships. Derek studied the formation, too organized to be raiders, too heavy to be exploratory. This was an invasion fleet. "They're moving toward human territory," he said. "Toward Garrison 7 specifically." Liana highlighted their trajectory. "We're not just carrying intelligence about future attacks. We're watching one happen in real time." Derek felt his new heart rate spike. Garrison 7 housed 15,000 personnel, civilians, military, families. It was a logistics hub lightly defended because it was supposed to be behind secure lines. "We have to warn them," he said. "Our comms are barely functional. We can't broadcast far enough to reach them before the Carveth do. Then we go faster. The engines are held together with prayers and spite. Push them harder and we'll tear apart before we arrive." Derek moved to the engineering console, studying the power distribution. An idea formed, reckless and desperate. What if we divert everything to engines? Life support, weapons, shields, everything. Go dark and sprint for the station. That gives us no protection if the Carveth detect us. They're focused on their target. We're a damaged raider beneath their notice. Derek started making the calculations. We can cut the journey to 10 hours, maybe less. Liana considered it, then nodded. "Do it." "I'd rather die trying than drift here knowing what's coming." They worked together, Liana handling the physical modifications while Derek managed the power routing. The bond between them made coordination effortless. He knew what she needed before she asked. She anticipated his intentions without explanation. Within an hour, they'd stripped the raider down to essentials and poured everything into the engines. The ship lurched forward, acceleration pressing them into their seats with brutal force. 9 hours, Liana said, checking their speed. "But we're running on fumes. If anything breaks, we're done." Then nothing breaks. Derek strapped in beside her. We make it or we don't. No middle ground. They burned through space in desperate silence, watching the Carveth battle group advance on sensors while hoping the raiders didn't notice one small damaged ship racing ahead of them. 7 hours in, the engines started failing. Power fluctuations, temperature spikes, the kind of warnings that preceded catastrophic breakdowns. Liana fought to keep them stable, but Derek could feel her exhaustion through their bond. She'd given blood, repaired the ship, and now piloted it beyond safe limits. Even Nightborn had breaking points. 2 more hours, she said through gritted teeth, just 2 more hours. The engines held for 90 minutes. Then they died completely, momentum carrying them forward while critical systems failed one by one. They were still 20 minutes from Garrison 7 when the power finally gave out, leaving them drifting in darkness. "We're not going to make it," Derek said. Liana didn't answer. She was staring at something on the sensors, the last system still functioning on reserve power. A ship. Human military vessel, destroyer class, running a patrol route that brought it within hailing distance. "We don't need to make it," she said. "We just need them to find us." She activated the emergency beacon, broadcasting on all frequencies. A simple message repeated over and over. "Carveth invasion force inbound. 20 ships, Garrison 7 targeted." This is not a drill. The destroyer altered course, engines burning hard toward their position. Derek watched it approach through the viewport, hope and dread mixing in his chest. They'd done it. Delivered the warning. Saved thousands of lives. But as the destroyer pulled alongside and began docking procedures, Derek felt Liana's hand find his in the darkness. "When we get aboard," she said quietly, "they're going to separate us. Question us. Try to understand what happened. I know. And when they find out what I am, what we've become, they won't let me leave. Won't let you leave with me." Her grip tightened. "The blood bond makes you valuable. A human who can sense Nightborn, who carries our regenerative properties. Your military will want to study that. Use it." Derek hadn't considered that, hadn't thought past survival to consequences. "What do we do?" he asked. Liana turned to him in the darkness, her red eyes the only light in the dead ship. "We decide right now whether you're my prisoner or my partner, because everything that comes next depends on that choice." The destroyer's boarding team found them in the dead raider 30 seconds later, combat lights cutting through darkness. Derek raised his hand slowly, showing he was unarmed. Liana did the same, though everyone in that corridor knew she didn't need weapons to be dangerous. "Lieutenant Derek Kane, human military, serial number 77392, Derek said before they could ask. "This is Princess Liana Valorin of the Nightborn Eternal Court. We're carrying critical intelligence about the Karveth invasion force." The team leader, a hardened sergeant with scars that told stories, kept his weapon trained on Liana. "Step away from the Nightborn, Lieutenant." "No," Derek said. The word hung in the air like a challenge. The sergeant's eyes narrowed. "That's not a request, and my answer isn't changing." Derek moved closer to Liana instead of away. "She saved my life. Multiple times. Protected human intelligence. Disabled 3 Karveth raiders single-handedly. You want her cooperation, you treat her with respect." The sergeant looked between them, clearly calculating whether this was worth escalating. Finally, he lowered his weapon fractionally. "Both of you, come with us. Command wants to hear this personally." They were escorted to the destroyer's bridge under armed guard. The captain, a woman named Victoria Cross with steel-gray hair and eyes that matched, listened to their report without interruption. Derek laid out everything: the attack on the transport, their survival, the captured intelligence, the Karveth battle group bearing down on Garrison 7. "We've already detected the invasion force," Cross said when he finished. "Your warning gave us 12 minutes head start. We've evacuated non-essential personnel and called in reinforcements." She studied Liana with open calculation. "The question is what to do with you, Princess. I need passage to Nightborn territory," Liana said. "The intelligence I was carrying must reach my people. This invasion is larger than a human-Karveth conflict. You're asking me to let you leave with classified information about human defenses and enemy capabilities? I'm offering an alliance. The Nightborn have no interest in seeing humanity destroyed. We have mutual enemies." Liana straightened despite the weapon still pointed at her. "But I won't beg. Either you trust me or you don't." Cross turned to Derek. "What's your assessment, Lieutenant?" "She's telling the truth. Everything she's done has been to protect lives and preserve intelligence." He felt the bond pulse between them, confirming what he already knew. "And I'm going with her." That caused a stir among the bridge crew. Cross raised a hand for silence. "You're requesting discharge to accompany a foreign national?" "I'm requesting assignment as liaison to the Nightborn Court. Someone who understands both sides. Someone who can help prevent misunderstandings that lead to wars." Derek met the captain's eyes. "We need allies, Captain. She's offering one. I'm volunteering to make sure that alliance holds." Cross was quiet for a long moment, studying them both. Derek could see her weighing options, calculating political ramifications, measuring risks against potential gains. "The battle starts in 6 hours, she said finally. "If you want to prove your value, Princess, help us survive it. After that, we'll discuss your travel arrangements." Liana smiled. "Acceptable." They spent the next hours preparing. Derek shared everything from the Karveth database while Liana consulted with human tactical officers on Nightborn combat techniques. The bond between them made coordination seamless, each anticipating the other's thoughts. When the Karveth arrived, they came in force. 20 ships against the destroyer and 2 frigates that had answered the distress call. The odds were brutal, but they had surprise. They had intelligence. And they had a Nightborn princess who could do things human soldiers only dreamed of. Liana suited up in borrowed combat gear and deployed in a boarding pod, crossing the void between ships like she'd done against the raiders. But this time she had human marines with her, soldiers she'd trained in the hours before battle. Derek coordinated from the destroyer's tactical station, using his connection to Liana to relay real-time updates. He could feel her moving through enemy ships, sense when she was in danger, guide support to where it was needed most. The battle lasted 4 hours. Brutal, bloody, expensive. But they won. 3 Karvith ships destroyed outright. 7 disabled and captured, the rest retreating with their formation shattered and their invasion broken. When Lyanna returned to the destroyer, she was covered in blood that wasn't hers, and carrying a Karvith commander who held intelligence that would reshape the entire conflict. Captain Cross met her in the hangar bay personally. "That was quite a performance, Princess." "That was necessity, Captain." Lyanna handed over the prisoner. "This one knows who's supplying the Karvith with human intelligence. I suggest you ask before he stops being cooperative." Cross gestured for security to take the prisoner, then turned back to Lyanna and Derek. "I'm authorizing your request, Lieutenant Kane. You're reassigned as official liaison to the Nightborn Court, effective immediately." She extended a data chip. "This contains our formal alliance proposal. Terms are generous. Your people honor debts, Princess. So do we." Lyanna took the chip with something like respect in her eyes. "The Eternal Court will consider this carefully. See that they do." Cross looked at Derek. "You understand what you're signing up for? Living among the Nightborn, representing human interests in their court, navigating politics that make ours look simple." "I understand," Derek said. "And you're willing to do this permanently? The bond you share with the Princess isn't something you can walk away from." Derek glanced at Lyanna, felt her presence in his mind, that connection that had saved them both more times than he could count. "I'm not walking away," he said. "I'm walking toward something better." Lyanna's hand found his, not possessive, not claiming, just acknowledgement of what they'd become through necessity and choice. "Then go," Cross said. "Build that bridge. Make sure this alliance holds. And, Lieutenant," she almost smiled, "try not to start any new wars." "No promises, Captain." They departed on a Nightborn vessel that arrived 2 days later, sleek and dark and impossibly fast. Derek watched human space recede through the viewport, everything he'd known falling away behind them. "Regrets?" Lyanna asked beside him. "None," Derek said. "You? I should have let you die in that transport." She said it without heat, almost fondly. "Would have saved me considerable trouble. But you didn't?" "No, I didn't." Lyanna turned to face him fully. "I offered blood to a dying human and bound myself to him in ways I still don't fully understand. Made him stronger, faster, connected to me in ways that defy explanation. Refused to release him even when logic demanded it." "Why?" Derek asked. "Because you chose compassion when survival was the only rational choice. Because you trusted me when fear should have prevailed. Because in all my centuries, I've never met anyone quite so magnificently foolish." She smiled, genuine and warm. "And because the galaxy needs more people willing to make terrible decisions for the right reasons." Derek laughed. "Is that what we're doing? Making terrible decisions?" But together, Lyanna's hand tightened on his. "Partners, remember? You chose that word." "I did, and I meant it." Outside, the stars shifted as they jumped to faster-than-light travel, racing toward Nightborn space and whatever came next. Derek felt the bond pulse between them, that connection forged in blood and desperation and choice. He'd offered blood to a fading vampire princess. She'd refused to release him. And somehow, impossibly, that had saved them both. The ship flew on through darkness, carrying 2 people who'd found something worth fighting for in each other. Not romance, not ownership. Something stranger and stronger. Partnership forged in fire. Alliance built on blood, trust earned through impossible choices. And a future neither of them could predict, but both were willing to face together. The story of humanity among the stars had always been about reaching for the impossible and making it real through sheer stubborn will. This was just the next chapter, and it was going to be magnificent,